Welcome back to What Happens Next, the podcast dedicated to having deeper conversations around some of the challenges we face when we're in our 50s and 60s and thinking about what happens next in our lives. I'm your host, Chris Ames, and I've spent a couple of decades helping people navigate what happens next financially, because my job as a chartered financial planner is to help people work out how much is enough financially, help them work out where they are on that journey, and if they're there, help them transition to whatever's next. But if they're not, build a robust plan so that we can get them there. But a couple of years ago, in a conversation with a client, I realised that having the money bit done doesn't always mean that you're particularly well prepared for either retirement or what happens next. And this is why this show not only talks about money, but also talks about some of the other important factors in our lives, which we need to think about when we're thinking about what happens next, so that we can plan and prepare for that successful retirement or whatever's next in our lives in a way that works for you. And my mission is to help you and people like you as much as possible navigate that next stage. This week we've got a conversation about community, and what I want to do is share my insights in why getting actively involved in your community can increase your sense of bliss. So without further ado, on with the show. So hopefully that gave you a real insight into why community is so important in our lives. Hopefully that was useful, but I'd love to know, and please feel free to get in touch. Tell us what you do in your community that gives you that sense of bliss. Love to hear from you. See you next week on What Happens Next. Welcome back to What Happens Next, the show dedicated to exploring some of the aspects we need to consider when we're thinking about, in our 50s and 60s, either retirement, or if we're not keen on the term retirement, what happens next in our lives. I'm Chris, I'm your host. I'm a chartered financial planner, and I run my own chartered financial planning business with me and my team on the Essex coast. Now, last week's podcast, we explored the concept of community well-being, and I explained why all the evidence points to the fact that it's going to be really important in our lives to get a sense of community. The Greeks spoke about it. They spoke about charonic well-being. We know that through the work of Robert D. Putnam, a renowned scientist, and his amazing book, Bowling Alone. You should definitely check that book out if you're thinking about doing more community things. We know that community is fantastically good for our mental health and our well-being. But this week I wanted to talk to an expert on community, and I can't think of anybody finer than Thomas and Penny Power. So in this interview, Thomas and Penny share the pivotal role of community in both their business life and their personal life, what community means to them, looking at what they've done in their life's journey, and Penny and Thomas are in their 60s, to transition from where they were in their business lives to where they are now, and while that's working better, we have some amazing conversations about self-worth versus self-esteem, building a community to support you do what you want to do with your life. And we explore the concepts of technology, its impact on loneliness, why face-to-face relationships are the key to building deep and meaningful relationships. And in the end, we really share some practical tips about what you can do if you're finding and building community in your own life. I think you're going to get a lot out of this, particularly if you're thinking about what happens next, but you're thinking about some of those social and community gaps that you think you need to fill. So without further ado, let's go on with the interview. We're on a mission with What Happens Next to help as many people as we can navigate the next chapter of their life. So I need a favour. I'd like you to visit our YouTube channel at What Happens Next Live, and we'll make sure we put a link to the YouTube channel in the comments. Enjoy the videos, like the ones that you get benefit from, but most importantly, please subscribe. We want to help as many people as we can with What Happens Next, and subscribing to our YouTube channel for free is the easiest way you can help us. What I want to do is explore how the conversation today is going to fit into that What Happens Next framework. Because What Happens Next is about helping people transition and make important change in their life. And we've been really lucky to interview some amazing people about financial well-being, about really getting deep and identifying what life means to you, looking at your purpose and values, looking at intellectual and occupational well-being and making sure that continues. But one aspect of well-being we've not really dug deep enough into yet is the importance of community in our lives, particularly when we're making change. Because my experience when working with clients, particularly if, particularly if they're leaving a career they've done for a number of years and they're starting a business or they're going on to something new, is your tribe, the people around you, are fundamentally important to give you support, confidence, and skills and abilities to allow you to do whatever you're doing next. But also, and I would say this, wouldn't I? But I believe kindness and helping others is really important. And I think community is about doing that. Community isn't only about the sort of work communities we surround ourselves with, but also about the communities where we're trying to help others. I'm spending 2 days next week, 2 evenings next week, walking around the streets of my local area, helping out at a Santa sleigh where we raise money for local charities. And I'm really proud of being part of that community, the community of local people who fundraise every year to make sure that local charities are not neglected when it comes to fundraising. Now, when I was thinking about who we could invite on to talk about community, there was one person that sprung to mind more prominently than others, and that was Penny. And Penny and Penny is going to share with us what community means to her in her life, how she believes it fits into her well-being, but also the well-being of the people she works with. But I want to start, Penny, with a really important question. Tell us a little bit about you and why community is so important to you. Okay. You're on mute, so I don't know whether that's us or...
Sorry, that was me. Thomas is trying to come in. I muted you when he walked in and said, I can't find the link, which is not...
This is part of the challenge with live interviews, isn't it? The technology never goes to plan.
I think it's quite pertinent because community starts with tolerance and patience.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So what does it mean to me, did you say? I think community, to me, is a very emotional word to begin with. And, if I think a lot of your listeners will have their home lives, obviously, they'll have their family lives, they'll have their social lives, they'll have their business lives. Yeah. And I'm highly connected in business through LinkedIn and things like that, but I haven't got any emotional connection with people there. So community, to me, is an emotional connection, and it's somewhere where I feel safe. I feel very comfortable being myself, deeply myself, having deep conversations. So I suppose it's that sense of real deep belonging to something. where you have an attitude of long term. You're not looking to achieve something in a short term from it, and where everybody's equally looking to contribute, and you want to contribute as well. And I think the energy and community that I believe in is very much an energy of love, which tends to scare people when I do my sort of corporate speaking. But actually, the definition of love is just deep affection. And
Yeah.
I think it is really nice if you can walk around the world with a sense of deep affection for other human beings.
Well, I mean, for me, that deep affection, and I've been accused of having an overly optimistic worldview, but that deep affection, that starting point of love, allows me to live a life where my well-being's high. And that actually is where it is the starting point. For those of our audience who don't know about you, tell us a little bit about your background, where you've come from, and what makes you the person you are today.
So I think a lot of what makes us today is also our childhood experiences of life. And I came from a really super family, youngest of four, great parents and everything. Like many people who have parents from the silent generation, it wasn't necessarily an emotional connection you had with your parents.
Yeah.
It was a very dutiful connection, and they never let me down, but it wasn't an emotional one. And as the youngest of four siblings, I was the last really in the family to leave home. And I spent a lot of time on my own in a village, and I had a deep sense of loneliness. And I needed, I didn't really know it. You don't really know that until you look back on life, because when you're a child, that's your normality, and you don't know what anybody else's life is like. But when I look back, I think that I was always searching around the village that we lived in for somebody to talk to. And, on my bike, just cycling around, and, it'd be really exciting if I could meet any age person and just say hi to them. And then as I went into the workplace, I found that at 19, I had failed to get into physiotherapy for academic reasons. And I went in a gap year into the workplace. And suddenly I found myself in a business environment which was alien to me. And I didn't really want to be in business. That wasn't really what fulfilled me. But I immediately sought a sense of family in that company. And I didn't realize that people would put masks on and in a business environment. I just went in as a very free bird. And I did bring a sense of love and connection inside that company. And I ended up staying in the IT industry. But what I realized, all the way you're looking back, as Steve Jobs says, you can join the dots looking back. I was always looking for a deep connection with people. And then discovering that other people also want that deep connection. And then when I became a leader, and I was in the IT industry in the early 80s, 1983, I started a huge booming time. And I accelerated my leadership responsibilities and positions very quickly. And when I became a leader, I just realized I was quite nurturing and wanted the success of anybody who worked for me. I wanted them to be successful. And, later on I was told I was a servant leader. And then naturally for me, when I gave up work to have my children, I started looking much more for community, and that more was in the social world. And I actually struggled to find that, because I found it difficult to find a connection with people that I felt a sense of significance and contribution with. And I started in 1998 an online community for business owners, because Thomas, as an incredible entrepreneur, I could see what it was like when you're a business owner. And I said, I'd really love to connect business owners as friends. And then that became a global community. So it was sort of a journey, but, it's a journey from what was really deeply inside my heart around the fact that, loneliness is around us always. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we haven't got people around us. We can feel lonely because we don't have a sense of significance or a place to contribute, or for the people to contribute towards us.
It's so interesting. One of the most sort of personal interviews we did on, as some of the people listening to this will know, I hosted a podcast with my daughter about kindness.
And one of the most pertinent interviews we ever did was with a guy who leader in a big insurance company who did some volunteer work for Age UK. And Age UK have got this amazing scheme where they connect people in the business world to people who older people in their 80s who need friends. And Jay, I remember Jason said something really interesting to me. He said, I learned a lot more from Sue, who was his friend, than I did, because she lived a fascinating life. And it's that, she was surrounded by people. She lived in Liverpool. She was surrounded by people, but nobody had taken the time to connect with her in a meaningful level. And that just taking that time on a phone call once a week was really, really interesting.
That loneliness. I mean, you see it on television at the moment, this Christmas appeal that morning TV does.
Yeah.
And I think I've got 85 million minutes now donated by people to connect with people and help them not feel lonely over Christmas. But I think that this loneliness feeling and this feeling of not feeling like anybody would really notice you has become so prevalent because of technology, and which has connected us but totally disconnected us at an emotional level. And so it's affecting people in business now quite deeply, where in business, when you had a great loyalty to a company or you enjoyed the tribe around you in your department, you just don't have that same sense. It's much more task and productivity based, your business relationship with the company now.
How do we bridge that gap?
Well, I think it's about, when I do my speaking and I go into companies, lawyers, accountants, so many companies where I talk about it, what you actually just get people to realize is to start acting at a human level. And in a way, somehow business isn't always humane in the sense that it doesn't always take time for you as a human. And we're not robots yet, thank God. And, nothing will replace the emotional human needs that we have, which Tony Robbins puts so well. And we can talk about those when you've got a gap and feel that's appropriate.
And I suppose the other thing I'm curious about, and you mentioned it, because you went through that. Sorry, morning, Thomas. How are you? You're right. I wanted to make sure that you're doing well.
Morning.
We got the technology working, and you managed to get in, which is absolutely brilliant. While we're saying that, we are live on LinkedIn, so feel free to. I can see the comments on the technology I'm using, so feel free to comment questions. We'd really love your input if you're watching. I suppose one of the big things you mentioned, Penny, and I'd be interested in your insight in this, Thomas, is that replacement of community. Because a lot of the people we're trying to help with the What Happens Next project are going through a transition in their lives. And potentially they're leaving that big corporate environment and going into a brave new world. So how do we navigate that, and how do we find communities in a world that might be quite scary to us?
Is that one aimed at me?
Yeah, it is.
I think the thing is, Chris, the organisations don't really understand networking and community building yet. And they don't realise it's their responsibility to build these networks and create these communities to perform better in their businesses. They don't associate the two things between whether it's customers, suppliers, shareholders, investors, employees. They don't relate these two things. They think I'm a company and I do transactions and I make money, and out there is my town, city, is the world, and I'm only connected to my suppliers and my clients, my employees, my shareholders, my investors. They don't relate the two things. So you have all these organizations who then behave in a way where they effectively give philanthropy, give charity by investing in local projects, but they don't think about the fact that the community is their project. Everything around their organization is their project. It's not a case at the end of the year having £100,000 spare and investing it in a charity. That's great, but that's philanthropy. that's not investing in building a community. And organizations don't relate to the two things. Individuals in companies don't relate to the two things because companies are about numbers, money, transactions, goals, targets, share prices. And they think that over there is different. But it's not. It's the same. It's the same. And your goal in an organization is to contribute to your town, village, community, city, just as much as you contribute your business, services, or products.
But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because as a small business owner, I think those two things are interconnected. But when I was in corporate life, it was a bubble. So how do we help people who are leaving that bubble navigate into this new world of being in an environment where community is super important?
I think one of the biggest things for people like that is they've come from, they gained their significance from the job title, the privileges they had in the company, the flights, the hotels, the expense accounts, maybe the car park. They gained a sense of significance in that way. And also, sadly, and I'm sure you have lots of conversations with people that you're helping, when they leave, they think those people that they have been buddies with are still going to think about them when they leave. And very soon the phone doesn't keep ringing, and those calls and emails don't get replied. Because as far as they're gone, you've left. You've
left that bubble, haven't you?
And in a way, there might be envy of their courage. There could be all sorts of things, but you've left that bubble, and you no longer are relevant to them at all in their hardworking existence. Yeah. And so it's a very,
unless you bring them some leads or referrals.
So you're very much, well, we can talk about that, but you are very much, and we know a few people at the moment that are transitioning like that are in our community. And it's, you first of all really have to get a group of people around you that help you have a sense of self-worth. Because what I've talked about is business gives you self-esteem because of all these trappings and all these labels and everything, but they don't actually nurture your self-worth. And and I know to be able to go out on your own and transition, you've got to look deep inside yourself and have a sense of worth and what your worth is to others beyond purely the skills that you've acquired.
The other interesting thing, Chris, about all this is that organizations don't really understand their business model audience very well, because when you hit 50 in an organization anywhere in the world, you're written off as now redundant.
Yeah.
I think, well, there you go, do your pension, sail around the world, mow the lawn, play golf. This is the perception of anyone over 50. So anyone over 50 is done with, no longer required in our organization. Yet incredibly experienced and brilliant mentors to the next generation coming through in their 20s to build the next organization. Great to listen to the old wise tales. But the interesting thing is, even though the over 50s become invisible when they transition out, that's actually where all the capital is. Between 50 and 80. That's where most of the capital is in the market, because they're at the end of their savings program. Many of them will have cleared their mortgage by their 50s, and they're now reinvesting in the market in various different things, whether it's travel, cars, or whatever it might be. And I think individuals who run organizations, because they tend to be under 50, they forget the over 50s, where the money is. So there's a lot of misinformation in the market.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the entire point of looking at what happens next, because if we can, at a particular age, look at our lives and say, well, look, I've got bucket loads of value to give. How do we make sure that I'm using those skills, expertise and knowledge and bring those to the table to make sure that your worth. And your point about self-worth was a really interesting one, Penny, and self-worth versus self-esteem. When I always look at it, I think self-esteem is a bit of an external game, isn't it? Self-esteem's a game where you go, what's my job title, or what's my what company car have I got? Or self-worth's a bit more difficult because you've got to ask yourself some difficult questions. And I think it's probably easier not to do that. But as a business owner, sometimes you need to do it. Thomas, I'm curious. We've Penny's sort of provided me with an insight into this. Tell me about what community, the word community, means to you.
Well, it means lots of different things, but at its heart, it means love.
Yeah.
And if you want to add more words to that, it's support, and it's about being seen. It's about being seen, being heard, being recognized. And one of the downsides of the Silicon Valley technology revolution of the last 60 years is, by creating all of these systems that connect people, and all of this social media and all of this messaging that we now have, they've actually created an environment of loneliness and isolation.
Yeah.
And they're monetizing that loneliness and isolation by getting us to pay a monthly subscription for all of these various messaging, marketing, social media platforms. So they are making money from the loneliness. They are making money from the isolation, whether we're paying for this system here, StreamYard, or Google Meet, or Zoom, or any one of these messaging systems. And with all new technology, there's always a downside. You know, with all of this shift to AI, huge productivity gains coming in, and then the doomsters, it's all going to end in Terminator 2. And so I think Silicon Valley doesn't take enough responsibility for the technology it puts into the market. A little bit like I heard social media described by the CEO at Salesforce, Mark Benioff. Social media are the new cigarettes. In the 70s, we smoked cigarettes. In the noughties and the 20s, we live on social media, but it's still all around the hand and the mouth and the face and so on. So I think there's not enough responsibility taken by the technology industry for what they've put into the market.
What's the antidote? What's the antidote we can do for ourselves to mitigate that?
Well, to Penny and I, it's always about building community, connecting people, networking, support, big groups, little groups, small groups, local groups, cycling groups, old groups, young groups, every type of group. What we've got is a few very big platforms. What we need is millions and millions of small, intimate groups.
Yeah, I saw you last week, Penny, and actually in my life, what I've realised is deeper relationships trump more superficial ones every day of the week.
Of course. And you need them in many forms. You need business groups, you need sports groups, you need old men's groups, young men's, you need tennis groups, cycling groups, walking groups. But what you've got is a few giant platforms in technology, what the market wants, what the user wants, because those big platforms are basically aimed at shareholders and advertisers.
Yeah.
They help
You're the
shareholders.
product, aren't you? Yeah.
You're the product. But what we want as the user, notice we're called the user, not a member.
Yeah.
What we want is lots of love and local support in business, in sport, in friendship, perhaps in church, whatever it might be. But you want millions and millions of small, as opposed to a few bigs. You want effectively a big, small strategy, lots and lots of small. That's what people actually want.
The technology can empower you to connect with those smaller communities, right?
It can, but it's not very good at it yet.
Yeah.
None of these platforms are very good at small, intimate groups locally around you. They're really not, because if they were, companies would be doing it, individuals would be doing it, and they're not doing it yet.
But there are some remarkable ones.
Yeah, but it does take people to then use those tools like you do and like other people in communities all over the country and all over the world to then connect and do it in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, it does. But in order to provide a solution like we provide with our small intimate group of 100, we've had to use lots and lots of different technologies, subscribe to lots and lots of different software, and effectively create a mosaic of software to provide a solution.
Gotcha.
It would be better if that was available off the shelf, so people could create their small intimate groups on their doorstep.
what I want to talk a little bit about is how in your lives and in your experience of building communities, the impact of those intimate, close, personal caring communities have on your own personal well-being and what you've experienced through others. So tell me how much, we know well-being is a mosaic and there's a lot of things that contribute to us being happy. But how does community contribute to both you being happy, and what do you see in the communities you build?
I really hope you're enjoying the interview so far. But now what I'd like you to do is take action to help you work out what happens next in your life. The easiest way to do that is to do the What Happens Next quiz. It's free to do, takes about 5 minutes, and you can do it while you make a cup of tea and wait for the next part of the interview. You can visit www.whathappensnext.life/quiz. You'll get your results by email immediately. And what the quiz will do is give you an insight into the areas of wellbeing you're doing really well at, but also the areas that you might want to improve. Enjoy the quiz. Let us know what you think. And let's get on with the interview.
You go ahead, Babes.
Well, I think we've covered a lot about the sense of love and contribution and feeling significant. I think there's two angles to it. It's whether you lead one and whether you are a citizen of one. And I think it's good to address both of those. So what it gives us when we're a citizen of one is a great sense of safety and a group of people who sort of there's some level of certainty and predictability in the experience you'll have when you step into it, whether, as you say, all these different diverse types of groups, the church, a sports group. And so for me, I think since I had to actively go and seek a community because I actually quite lonely in my social life because my family, my marriage and my work has sort of dominated my life. It's not given me enough time to build a social group around me in my workplace, in my home place. And so for that, it gives me that sense of just being loved and nurtured in my own way by others and allowing me to do that for others. The leadership thing really interests me to talk about because people are running Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. A lot of people are already leading groups, but I think a lot of people lead them really with the intention of the group serving them in some way. I'm going to set up a group and through that market my business. I'm going to set up a group and it's going to make me feel good as the leader because it'll give me sense of significance. And I talked earlier about, my natural style, and I'm not saying this in a smug way, it's just the way I've survived, is to be a servant leader, is very different. And I think when you do find a group, if you're not feeling comfortable in it, you have to keep looking because that servant leadership is what you're actually seeking. Communities work best when actually, to a certain extent, the leader is almost invisible. The citizen are more important than the leaders. Yeah. So they're there to create the culture, to create nice people, to create maybe events and love. But it's actually the citizens within it that are the ones who are the most critical element and energy within it. So if you look at if I just finish that off, you look at a pub is a community. When a pub opens its door, the landlord is very critical. They're behind the bar and they're setting the culture and they're welcoming people. A really good pub, it becomes the people in front of the bar that are why you walk into it. You don't rely on that landlord being there. And it's the people in it that make you feel great when you step in, know your name, make you feel loved, talk to you.
Cheers. That was an amazing show, wasn't it?
Where everyone knows your name. So, and I think that servant leadership is something that really needs to be taught more in running a community. And also people are labeling things wrongly. And I think it's distorting what a community is. And because I had somebody in America say to me, I want to connect because I run a community. And he explained the whole thing that he does. And I said, and where is the community element? And, he was basically running a training business and training people. Yeah. And he was down the one at the front doing all the talking. Yeah. So I think it's not necessarily easy to find places but community will really nourish you and will make you feel it's very, it should be diverse, but very.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well,
Can I answer that question, Chris?
Please do.
Because obviously I was just thinking about all the different groups that you talked about well-being, the mosaic of well-being that makes up your well-being. And I was thinking, well, obviously there's the Bit 100 group, which is a business group, support group for. So I'm being a member of that, being a leader of that, as Penny says, and being a member of that satisfies the business need of well-being, which is really about mental stimulation.
And we talk about that as part of our mix, intellectual and occupational well-being, particularly for the individuals who are coming out of sort of full-time careers where they've been in for 30 years, is actually one that a lot of people are nourishing to replace.
Yeah, nice. Intellectual and occupational well-being. But then I was thinking about all the other groups. I'm part of an AI dinner group because I'm particularly interested in AI and I want to know where that's going. I'm part of a cycling group on a Saturday morning where it's basically old men group therapy, going out together. I'm in a paddle group because I love playing that new paddle tennis. And I've got my best friends group, which is half a dozen people that I've known for 50 years that I have dinner with occasionally. And then we've got the local church group. So you've got 6 groups there that are just supporting my well-being in 6 different ways.
100%. And I think all of those areas as well. I mean, the paddle group and the cycling group are about physical and social, right? You know, there's elements that fit into. I mean, I think everything we do in our lives, if it's sort of supporting our well-being in a positive way, probably fits into a bunch of different buckets around the area of well-being. One thing that you mentioned, Thomas, that really resonated with me, because the community that probably means most to me is family. And I don't know whether I'd label it. I mean, if we're defining communities as places where we receive love and support, I can't think of anyone better than my family to be part of. So where does family fit into that?
Well, it's probably for everyone, assuming they get on with their family, which is not necessarily consistent across the world, as we know. It's probably their number one support group, in the sense it's mutual support both ways between parent and child, or adult and adult if they're older. But it's probably their number one support group. And I would say, for Penny and I, it's probably our number one priority. But I think each of these small intimate groups that we're part of are supporting us in a different way. Yeah. And business support is one of those, what you called intellectual and occupational well-being. I think is very good. But personally, I need half a dozen on top of the family group.
100%.
So I don't know how Penny would answer that.
Yeah, I would say family is my number one, but it's also where I learn so much within the family. And I learn what community is, because community to me is an extension of your family. And Thomas and I, as parents, have never been controlling parents. We've never, I don't think we've ever really shouted at them. We've never created really strong, strict boundaries. We've always given them a sense of empowerment, which is really important to us. And then when I think of building a business community, I think of it in the same way. You don't want to be controlled, and you want empowerment. That's why we call it citizenship rather than membership, because it's really important that, I think children who are in a family who are over-controlled either become very weak, disempowered people, or they become very rebellious and run away from you, and you don't want to see them. And it's the same in any community. The empowerment has to go to the individual with, fully with love.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still on that learning journey as a dad. I'm in one of those situations where I think I'm sort of good, and then something happens and I go, I'm not equipped to deal with that, and sort of learn from that experience. But
it's a work in progress for us all, Chris.
But
it's life, isn't it?
But everything is about communication, isn't it? Everything.
Sure. Yeah.
It's about chatting these things through, and it's the same in any community. And that level, getting people to open up and have a deep, honest conversation with one another is really critical. And in any community, it is the same.
But Penny, you said something. I mean, that self-esteem you said, and that's where sort of that old corporate style of leadership in any aspect of our life is actually, we're having deeper, meaningful conversations about self-worth, helping others, and just leading from the back as opposed to leading from the front. I think is probably what I've learned in being a dad and being a business owner over the past few years as being fundamentally important.
And in both cases, not worrying about your weaknesses and your vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of people applying to BIP 100, and they say, Thomas will say to them, why do you want to join? Well, I've had a very successful career and I just want to give back and help others. And what will those people be able to do for you? Well, I don't really need any help. We say, well, it's not right. Because if you build a community based on people only wanting to give, well, that's a very beautiful value. There's nobody going to receive.
There's also an assumption there that you're finished, right?
Yeah, that's true as well.
And
a lot of people over 50 do think that, Chris.
Yeah, they've stopped that growth mindset.
I've interviewed a lot of people over 50 who mentally they're written off.
This is why I'm really passionate about this What Happens Next project, because if we can give people the perspective that 50 is a start, 50 plus is a start as opposed to an end, and actually empower people with looking at this from a perspective of what can you now contribute to help your well-being, it's going to be really important. But if somebody's in that position, navigating what happens next in their lives and thinking about the communities that can support them, how do you define, we've talked about love, we've talked about contribution, but what makes a community right for a particular individual? And I suppose the other sort of thing that I want to add to that, what makes it a community and just not a network of individuals? What's the difference?
This is a great question. I think Penny might correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you have to have a conversation with yourself if you're at the more mature end of your life, 50 plus, about what kind of identity you want to have, and is that driven around? Also depends on your financial position.
Yeah.
But is it about being part of a charity group and investing all your time and effort in charity? Is it part of investing your time in people who are disadvantaged, be it drugs or refugees or anything like that? Or do you still want to be intellectually stimulated by new ideas or technology or business? And I think you've got to spend some time analyzing the identity you want to have that satisfies your needs. And also, as Penny said earlier, what's your loneliness profile? Because I think loneliness is complex to define.
Yeah.
And loneliness can be physical health and movement. Loneliness can be mental health. Loneliness can be friendships. Loneliness can be spiritual. You've got no other force or universal force in your life. And I do think you've got to spend time analysing your own profile over a certain age of what kind of life you want, and then build the small intimate groups around you that deliver all the things that you want your identity to have.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Thomas, you've talked about your 6 to 7 groups that you've got. Identity, to a certain extent, for all of us, is multifaceted, isn't it? So it's that element of just getting those puzzle pieces together but stripping away what was before potentially. If a career and a job in one particular place has been a prominent part of your life.
Can I add something to what Thomas just said? Because it was brilliant, everything you said there, darling. But one thing that I really think is critical, and I actually learned this as a phrase through TJ, who runs these neuroscience wellbeing sessions for us, is how important it is to be in pursuit of something.
Oh, yes.
And so it's all right. I missed lots myself. And that when we look at what TJ teaches is our dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins dose. And those are our brain chemicals that actually are being affected by our well-being. If we're disconnected, our oxytocin's low, et cetera, I won't go into all the details of those. That's a different conversation. But one critical thing is the reward center of our brain, where we find joy and excitement and actually a reason for being and getting out of bed is to be in pursuit of something.
Yeah. I really like that.
I really like it. And sometimes when I get demotivated, when I can tell that I've exhausted myself, so my dopamine's low, I really sit with those words and think, what am I in pursuit of now? What is it that I'm ultimately in pursuit of? Some people will say, what is my vision? But, you can be in pursuit of something each day. And that to me is, when the what's next thing is, you have to decide what you're in pursuit of. And just to quickly finish that off, it was really interesting when I watched a documentary about old people in homes and how quickly they mentally fade away, basically. And there was an old people's home. Every night they said to their person as they were tucking them up into bed, they said, don't forget, tomorrow you need to do this. And it could be you need to write a card for your daughter, or you need to do this. And as they went to sleep, it kept their mind active, remembering that they need to do something.
Yeah.
And I think if we don't have a quite significant to-do list that makes us feel significant to ourselves and others, we will slowly reduce ourselves.
Yeah.
Can I add to this, Chris? Because Pen is right, and thanks for reminding me about that, babes. This need of being in pursuit is, I totally agree, it's absolutely critical. And obviously people set goals of things they want to achieve, and then they achieve those goals and then think, oh shit, now what? I need to set more goals, because achieving goals can be annoying as well as satisfying. But I do believe when you are pursuing something or in pursuit of something, it actually needs to be unreachable. That you can't actually get to it. And it annoys you that you can't get to it. So it has to be a goal beyond reach, if you like, or a place beyond reach, because not getting there gets you up in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's the kind climb, of like an unreachable goal. Sorry, I missed what you said.
It's the climb. It's not getting to the top. It's the climb.
It's the climb.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really interesting. We've had this conversation before, Thomas. We've got clients who have sold their businesses successfully, exited, left careers where they've done really well from a financial perspective, but they miss the climb. And it's about a lot of what happens next to me is, well, what climb are we going on now?
It's very important.
Yeah, 100%.
This is very important. I know many. I've got many friends from the tech industry from the last 40 years who've had those giant financial outcomes, and they have now what I call success depression.
Yeah. And
success depression is a real thing, because they need to get back on the mountain and get back on the climb. But I've always believed when you're depressed, it's actually two words: deep rest.
Yeah.
And you're resetting for the next climb or the next goal.
I mean, I suppose the thing that we are, is an interesting conversation is success is defined ultimately by us, isn't it? And when we realise that financially we can choose what success looks like for us, and for a lot of my clients it's about a more nuanced, balanced perspective of success in life, then we can have some meaningful
I couldn't agree more. I mean, your personal
good.
definition is so critical. And we know a guy who's just left his huge corporate job and he's going to have a very different financial life moving forward. But he's redefining what his personal definition of success
100%.
is. And
I think I'm with you both. And the word you used there, Chris, was nuanced. I think it's really worth exploring that word in a lot of detail, because I think everyone's got their own version of the nuance.
Yeah.
Of how they define every single aspect from the moment they wake to the moment they go to sleep. I think there's a lot of detail in the nuance there for each individual person.
100%.
Depending on their health profile, their wealth profile, their goal profile, their spiritual profile, their charitable profile, and the multiple profiles that we have as humans.
And I think what we're trying to do with What Happens Next and these really great conversations is empower people to think about this sort of stuff, because we're not going to have the answers, right? But if we can empower people to go, well, actually, these are the component parts that I might want to think about, then hopefully they can take the step to have a glide path to a life they want to live. While I was thinking about
with you putting community in that mix, which I think is really important, I think it's really critical to say that we have to take personal responsibility for our loneliness.
Yeah.
And if we do decide, or whatever it is, whatever reason it is, we're going to community, you need to become active. Yeah. You can't be somebody that, I use the village as a metaphor for a community. You can't be someone that buys the manor house and flies in twice a year and expects people to recognise you in the pub.
Yeah, because you're not involved there, no,
You've got to take that. And it's a very interesting, when people are leaving our community and we talk to them, we say, well, of course, you never took personal responsibility for your experience within this community. What have you actually done? You're wanting to be fed by everybody. And, you have to, communities will not work if you don't have the attitude for it.
It's give and take, isn't it? It's the contribute totally. and provide. Yeah, no, I love that.
Chris, it's not give and take, it's give and receive.
Mm-hmm. Give and receive. Perfect. Love
receive,
that. Yeah. Love that. Talk to me. We've talked a little bit about the sort of impact of digital platforms. And I mean, my perspective's probably as a natural optimist, I appreciate the threat on our lives of digital platforms, but also see some of the advantages. But how do you think the world is changing the nature of community?
How do I think the world is changing the nature of community?
I can say
the way we live.
I think I can add something to it while you're thinking about that, Thomas. I think when change happens, it always goes to extremes. So if it's a seesaw and the balance is in the middle, and we go too far one way, which we clearly have with technology, what will happen is we'll go that way and then we go that way again. And I think there is just this conversation since COVID of loneliness and this priority around loneliness. People are starting to be very receptive to the conversations that we're having here, because they're starting to realise it's quite normal to feel the way I feel, because we're all talking about it and solutions are being sought and people's level of consciousness is raising. And, I read a book in 1997 about this. We've almost evolved as much as we can physically until we decide to start putting Neuralinks in our heads. And that's not a natural evolution, but it's our emotional and consciousness that's going to start to evolve. And I think that, companies are starting to realise that they've got quiet quitters and they've got, there's all sorts of issues of productivity because they're not caring enough at this level and creating communities within their businesses. And as individuals, we're realising that we've become too addicted to the online world and to the social media and the broadcast, which might help our self-esteem, but it's not helping our self-worth. So people are reaching out. We've never had so many people apply for our community. And, I think people are realising, they're coming to the reality that I need to do something about these emotional losses.
But what's interesting for me on that, Penny, is even though the pandemic was terrible in a lot of ways, what it did for a lot of us is make us think about what we want for our futures, right? Because it seemed to be for certainly me included, a bit of a sort of a reset. And we're finding that Zavallo, we're finding that we're having more conversations over the past 3 years, with people who are saying, well, that status quo doesn't work for me anymore, and I need to consider what my future looks like. So how do you think the world's changed over the past 3 years compared to previously? Do you think we're more conscious of those conversations now?
Do you want to say?
I would say yes, because the pandemic accelerated the adoption of the technology. It probably brought us forward a decade in terms of any conversations like this are very normal now, whereas pre-2020, these would be unusual.
Yeah.
I also think you're right. It got people to question the kind of lifestyle they wanted to live. And a lot of people moved to the seaside, and a lot of people moved from the seaside into the cities. Some people wanted to get away. Some people wanted to get to the theatre every month. But I still think, going back to your previous question about them, I still think there's an underlying loneliness in the world that the technology is failing to satisfy.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think the more technology we have with augmented reality, virtual reality, AI coming at us, the more demand there's going to be for offline, face-to-face, small, intimate groups covering every topic. Because I think that's what we physically need. To survive it. I'm very fascinated that everybody knows all the news every day now. You talk to everybody knows everything every day. So we've got this sort of global perspective where we're absorbing 5,000 or 10,000 different messages a day from the world, but we don't know what's happening on our doorstep.
We don't know our neighbour.
We don't know our neighbour.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see that change. It might be new platforms emerge. It might be old platforms reconfigure. But it's still not quite right where we are.
Help me understand a little bit. So what I want to do is get a bit practical. So if we've got somebody watching this who's thinking about what's next in their life, thinking about their well-being, appreciating the fact that they want to be members of certain communities or build relationships with other people to see what community might work with them, what are the practical tips that what's that sort of first small step somebody can take to help them do that?
I think that
you go ahead, Bose, because I answered this one last time with identity.
No, but I just think they need to actually sit quietly with themselves first, and think about what is missing at the moment. What is it that I'm actually yearning for? What am I thirsty for? To begin with. And Thomas, talked about all these different things. Is it sports communities? Is it church communities? All these different ones. But then also sit down and think about what is actually interesting to me at this stage. And when I talk about the 6 emotional human needs that Tony Robbins talks about, personal and professional growth is really important as part of our human needs. And so, what is it? In what way do you want to personally grow or professionally grow? And then really think deeply about what is it that you feel you can contribute, and where is that contribution going to be appreciated by others?
Love that. Absolutely love that. And where can people find out a little bit more about the work that you guys do?
Well, they can look up BIP 100, BIP, which stands for Business is Personal, 100.club. You can watch video and learn about us there, obviously on LinkedIn. And I have got a website, pennypower.co.uk, but I'm about to completely up. It's sort of relevant, but you know how these things need. So in January, that's my big in pursuit thing.
In pursuit of an updated website.
I'm in pursuit of that's on my mind a lot at the moment. I need to get my website updated. So, and Thomas, you connect with people in so many ways, don't you? On Twitter, Thomas Power on Twitter.
Yeah, I like WhatsApp. People can get in touch with me on WhatsApp or Twitter or LinkedIn or through bit100.club. I'm available on any platform they prefer. You can talk to me on any platform, anytime. I answer all my messages. I get about 1,000 messages every day. I answer all of them. I find it very easy to keep up with all the technology.
Amazing. And one final question. What's the in pursuit of the new website is a small one. What's the big in pursuit goal for both of you?
For me,
that's a goodie.
I think we are very, Thomas is an incredible networker. I mean, when I met him when I was 24, he had to teach me what networking was. And, we created the academy on the back of that, and then obviously brought the community element into it. I so believe in love in business, and we run these monthly lunches in St Pancras in a restaurant to help people experience, just as a one-off, what it's like when you really sit and personally connect with one another. And I just want the philosophy of love in business and for people to feel comfortable with it, getting out there. I'm not, it's not a thing I need to monetize always. I'm hoping to get around to write my book as well. So I'm in pursuit of thinking that maybe in our own little way we'll have spread a different way of people connecting in business through love rather than transactions.
If you're going to go for anything, Penny, in pursuit of love in business is a pursuit that's so big you're never going to achieve it, but it's such an admirable goal. Love that. Thomas, what's yours?
Well, I'm also totally behind Penny on in pursuit of love in business. Absolutely, I believe in that. I've always believed in that for the last 44 years since I've been working. But I am particularly interested in the science around networks and how they really do work, because I don't think as a human race yet we've solved this puzzle around the science of networking. We think we have, or we've got lots of platforms that think they've solved it, but they haven't solved it yet, the current platforms. And I'm very interested in the mix between all these online tools and the face-to-face and our emotional and psychological and physical needs. I'm very interested in that as a science. I don't know whether that's the science of networking or the science of networks or the science of community building, but I would like to get to the root of that problem and find a solution to it before I pass.
That's a great climb. I love that. Thank you both for joining me today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I know our audience have and will too. That's it for this What Happens Next Live. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully it was useful for you, and we'll see you on What Happens Next Live soon.
Lovely.
I really hope you enjoyed that. And one of the things that we really want you to do is get as much from the What Happens Next project as you can. And we think that one of the big things you're going to get loads from once it's written is the What Happens Next book. Now, that's currently a work in progress. So I'm doing the work to complete the book now. It will be ready in 2025. But what you can do today is join the waiting list. So you're one of the first people to get a copy and get loads of goodies on top. Because if you join the waiting list today, not only will you get access to the book first, you'll also get loads of goodies that we're currently working on in addition to the book, now ready for launch. To join the waiting list, simply visit whathappensnext.life/book and you'll be the first to know when the book comes out. So that was Penny and Thomas. I hope you agree that was brilliantly insightful. And remember, if you'd like to give us some feedback on the podcast, you'd like to let us know who we should have on, who we should interview, what subjects we should explore, we would love to know. This podcast ultimately is for you, and what we want to do is make sure that we're talking about issues that apply to the hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations of what you want to do in retirement, and we're relying on you to tell us what those things are. So if you email me personally at chris@Cervello, CERVELLO, F for Freddie, P for Peter.co.uk, we would love to know what you think. Have a lovely remainder of the day and the week, and we'll see you on What Happens Next soon.